So let's talk more about Lincoln Clay. When did you start to envision this character as the protagonist? And sort of, I would love to hear the process of how you kind of fleshed him out over time to make him a more complex character. Bill, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. It was kind of, the Mafia franchise, and one of the hallmarks of it is that we basically grabbed these kind of very specific time and places, and then, like Hayden mentioned earlier, we kind of insert a gifted anti-hero into that space. So when we started really thinking about Lincoln Clay, it kind of was simultaneous with both the year and also the setting. All three of those things kind of came up together. Like I said, one of the franchise pillars is capturing a moment in time and basically fully immersing the player in that. And it just really kind of made sense that the main character would be someone like Lincoln Clay, because it's this confluence of various things like Vietnam, it's also the South, he's mixed race, and by having him be that way, it opens a window so that we can examine other aspects of him as a character and help influence the story that way.
I was about to say, and this is probably something because we're so accustomed to it now, but being mixed race in 1968 was not common. I mean, Loving versus Virginia, which kind of ended, the laws prohibiting mixed race marriages, I don't even think that was on the books yet. I mean, I guess, I hate to say it, what advantages does that give you with his character, because he would be so distinct in that time, place, and setting?
Well, dramatically, it allows us to have a push and pull in terms of how he interacts not only with the other characters in the game, but also with the city and the world in general. And it also helps us inform a very kind of specific worldview in a certain degree. But it's just also, like I said before, it's just a dramatic window that kind of helps define and kind of place the game in New Bordeaux.
Well, also, it kind of means he really doesn't fit in anywhere, which is a big part of his character, from the fact that he's an orphan to this, nowhere where he goes does he just easily fit in, and that's a big part of his personality as well.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing I would say is when we talk about him being a gifted anti-hero, there's kind of two things that we always focus on. One is obviously his training as a soldier, which allows him to take on the mob and kind of take out these like mob bullies essentially that have greater numbers but don't have the advantage of kind of his tactical thinking or his military training. But the other one, which I think does come from his background of being an orphan and having to survive in an orphanage and having to survive on the streets and being part of some gangs and being mixed race, is his ability to bring together disparate characters, disparate people, kind of under a common banner and a common cause. So throughout the game, he recruits, a number of people to help him in his cause, and he's able to do that because he's got kind of a more, well-rounded worldview maybe than some of the other folks that don't have his same background.
I mean, yes, Lincoln clearly has a chip on his shoulder, but in an odd way, he's also a really strong manager, or like that's one way that you can kind of play the character, because he's bringing different people that they're not organizing themselves in a criminal way around ethnicity. They seem to be organizing themselves just because they seem to have a common goal. I mean, it's a very interesting way of approaching this. I would love to sort of hear more about that.
Well, fictionally, we've touched on a little bit that Lincoln served in Vietnam, and one of the things he did while he was there, he was actually part of the special forces and loaned out to the CIA. And historically, the CIA ran secret bases out of Laos, and they would basically conduct guerrilla warfare against the NV and the NVA and the VC. And as a part of that, there is an element of recruiting, the enemy of my enemy suddenly becomes my friend. So at least narratively within the game, that's something that is kind of centers him in terms of, like, Hayden said, he's able to rally these other people around. Normally the three underbosses who end up working for Lincoln, Cassandra, Vito, and Burke, they would never have anything to do with each other. But because of his past and kind of who he is, Lincoln is able to rally them together and point them in a single direction, which is going after Sal Marcano. It harkens back, like Andy said, he's kind of the odd man out, and when you're kind of the odd man out, that's also a skill you need to learn, but also as part of his training that he received when he was in Vietnam.
Now, without giving too much away, typically one doesn't just wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to take on the mob. It just doesn't work that way. So if you can give a sense of what is kind of the motivation. He already has good reason to be angry, but then what makes him specifically angry at the existing organized crime in New Bordeaux?
So obviously we touched on it in the trailer, but when Lincoln returns from Vietnam, let me back up a second. So Lincoln originally is an orphan. He spends time in a Catholic orphanage. When the orphanage is shut down, he falls in with a black mobster named Sammy Robinson, who has a biological son named Ellis, and they essentially adopt Lincoln. Lincoln joins the Army, spends 4 years in Vietnam, and at the start of Mafia III, Lincoln's just returned home. And his plan is to actually leave. He basically came back to say goodbye. But because of problems that Sammy's having, Lincoln's kind of fatal flaws, his loyalty, so he decides to stay and help out, which unfortunately ends with the Italian Mafia, which in our version of New Orleans is led by a guy named Sal Marcano, betrays the black mob and kills everybody. And that really that's really the catalyst for what Lincoln does for the rest of the game, which is him exacting revenge on Sal. But it's a special type of revenge. He just doesn't go out. If he wanted to, he could probably just go kill the guy. But as he says, that's not enough. Like, he wants to systematically dismantle Sal Marcano's criminal organization and replace it with his own criminal organization.